the grand pantomime of comedic mediocrity, enrobed in the tattered garments of outdated jests and worn-out cultural commentary. This is where we find Joe Rogan, a figure once seen as the vanguard of stand-up comedy, now reduced to the archetypal stool humper, grasping at the low-hanging fruit of right-wing talking points.
Did you show Joe Rogan to your mom, or am I making that up? No, I did. And I focus tested it on my brother, his girlfriend, and my mom. And honestly, they did not like it at all. My mom thought it was so crass and so rude. Her initial reaction was, is all he talks about just doing drugs and penises? How rude. That was her initial take. There was a couple funny moments in there which were shocking. Like the TSA line was a bar where he's like talking about how he's high, and he has a TSA officer come up to him and he's like, this is the point where I'm going to use the back of my hand on your crotch area. And like the thing that he said there is exactly a thought that I've had as well. Where I also have had that thought in my mind. I'm like, what difference does it make for me that you're using the back of your hand? You're still touching my dick. That was funny. Except he literally did that right after he did did you just assume my gender joke? Which was not even a joke at this point. It's like, it's 2024, man. Come on, dog. Come on, dude. Like, what's the name of the dude on the right? It's Bassem Youssef. Yeah. I prefer the back of a hand personally, sure. Yeah, a lot of his jokes, like he kind of reminded me of Cenk a little bit when he gets like really riled up and he's like, oh, he does a lot of like physical comedy the older he's gotten. I mean, I guess he was always a bit of a stool, but like a stool. Why are you guys saying, huh? It's like when you hump a stool. Like, it's when you do over the top physical comedy because your humor isn't funny. So you just have to do like Hassan Boomer confirmed. Get on up. Get on up. Jim Carrey, Robin Williams, Chris Farley all had a lot of physicality. Yeah, you're talking about people who are like not even in their stand-up bits, but instead talking about people as like, you know, comedians doing movies and shit. And also, there's a difference between like utilizing your physicality in a unique way versus your like stand-up comics versus comedic actors are different. That's number one. But also like Cat Williams would probably be a better example of someone who uses physicality in his bits, but ultimately his bits still work without that. Whereas Joe Rogan is like very obviously making the physical aspect of it the entire joke. Anyway, so as far as Joe Rogan goes, though, I mean, he's not a great stand-up comic. And his last special was also not great either. there's so much right-wing shit in it too. There's so, like, he has a bit where he's like, oh, we don't build mobile phones here. We let China build mobile phones. And like, I get the premise. Like, the premise is actually kind of funny. We're just like, we have so many undocumented migrants coming over. Like, you think none of them know how to build phones? Like, I'm sure if they can like cross the Rio Grande Valley, then they can figure out how to build a phone. And it's like, if he just keeps it at that, that's already a funny joke in and of itself, right? Like, you're overcoming such great odds to come here, whatever. But then he has to like tie that to so many like weird right-wing culture points. Oh, they have a bag of fentanyl shoved up their ass when they're crossing the Rio Grande Valley. I guess like that works as a right-wing joke. I would say that that's like a good right-wing joke. You know what I mean? Like, I obviously still get annoyed by it because it's like, come on, dude. Like, that's not how this works. But can't right-wing also be funny? Comedy can connect everybody no matter politics. As a joke, like it still is different than just doing did you just assume my gender? Like, that's a funnier joke as a standalone joke with its structure, the way the sentences are arranged, the way the words are arranged. And that's like the most I'll go to as far as like a right-wing joke that can be funny. But even then, it's just, it's unnecessary. Does that make sense? It's unnecessarily adding like fat to it in an effort to be right wing. So like, you could shave that off and it would still be funny. If anything, it'd be funnier because you're getting to the point faster. And then he's like, oh yeah, you know, they've never heard of a union. Like, he's like, a Guatemalan's never heard of a union. It's like, why do you care about that? Like, I thought you were supposed to be pro working class, you know? But beyond that, I think like his hyper obsession as a 60-year-old man talking about like the pregnant guy emoji. Like, come on, dude. It's a mo, bro. You're literally 60. Like, who gives oh, men can't get pregnant. Men can't get pregnant. It's like, dude, no one cares about this. Like, why are you still harping on this? Making COVID jokes. Even when he made fun of himself, I thought that like it still wasn't that good.
And who better to dissect this spectacle than Hasanabi, a connoisseur of both sharp political commentary and the art of calling out tomfoolery when it rears its unseemly head? As we traverse the comedic landscape of Rogan's latest special, it becomes increasingly apparent that what was once a garden of genuinely thought-provoking humor has withered into a barren field of cliches and half-baked observations. Rogan's material, much like his aging persona, seems to have succumbed to the inevitable entropy of time. The quips about drug use and genitalia, once the bread and butter of his irreverent style, now land with the grace of a lead balloon. It's as if Rogan, in his quest to remain edgy and relevant, has circled back to the same tired jokes that one might expect from a hackneyed comedian at an open mic night. Hasanabi's critique of Rogan's descent into physical comedy, specifically, the over-reliance on exaggerated, almost slapstick-like gestures, strikes at the very heart of the issue. Physical comedy, when wielded by the likes of Jim Carrey or Robin Williams, was an extension of their comedic genius, a flourish that elevated their performances to legendary status. But in Rogan's case, the physicality is not an enhancement, it is a crutch, compensating for the lack of substantive material. It's as if Rogan's stage presence has become a caricature of itself, a self-parody that underscores his inability to evolve as a comedian. Now, let us not ignore the elephant in the room, Rogan's foray into the political sphere. His attempt to weave right-wing rhetoric into his stand-up is, to put it bluntly, a disjointed mess. The jokes about undocumented migrants, fentanyl, and unions might resonate with a certain segment of his audience, but they do so at the expense of humor itself. Hasanabi astutely points out that these jokes, while structurally sound from a comedic standpoint, are burdened by the unnecessary fat of ideological baggage. The humor, which could have been sharp and incisive, is instead dulled by the weight of right-wing dogma. It is here that Rogan's true misstep becomes clear. His obsession with being controversial has led him down a path where the joke is no longer the focus, the ideology is. The constant harping on culture war issues, like the pregnant man emoji, reveals a comedian who is no longer interested in making people laugh, but rather in validating a specific worldview. It's a far cry from the days when Rogan's comedy was universal, connecting with people across the political spectrum. Now, it feels like he's pandering to a base that is more interested in being right than in being entertained. Hasanabi's analysis doesn't just stop at the content of Rogan's jokes, he delves into the very nature of comedy itself. Comedy, at its best, is a unifying force, capable of bridging divides and bringing people together in shared laughter. But when comedy is weaponized as a tool for political division, it loses its potency. Rogan's latest special, with its overtones of right-wing grievance and its undercurrents of cultural resentment, exemplifies this downfall. It's comedy that preaches to the choir, alienating those who don't subscribe to the same ideological echo chamber. And let's talk about the self-deprecation, or rather the lackluster attempt at it. Rogan's COVID jokes, even when aimed at himself, fail to land with the impact they once might have had. It's as if he's lost the ability to laugh at himself, or perhaps, more accurately, to make others laugh with him. The self-awareness that once made Rogan relatable is now overshadowed by a defensiveness that reeks of insecurity. His attempts to poke fun at his own controversies come off as forced, lacking the genuine humility that made his earlier work so enduring. In conclusion, Hasanabi's review of Joe Rogan's latest special is not merely a critique of one comedian's performance, it is a broader commentary on the state of comedy in an era where the culture wars have bled into every facet of entertainment. Rogan, once a titan of the stand-up stage, has become a cautionary tale of what happens when a comedian loses sight of the fundamental purpose of their craft, to make people laugh. In his quest to remain relevant, Rogan has sacrificed the very thing that made him great, and in doing so, has alienated a portion of his audience that once found solace in his irreverent humor. As Hasanabi so effectively illustrates, Rogan's latest special is not just a miss, it is a signal that the comedian has strayed far from the path that once made him a household name. It is a reminder that in the world of comedy, relevance is not maintained by clinging to outdated jokes or by pandering to a particular political base, but by evolving with the times and staying true to the essence of what makes people laugh. And in this regard, Joe Rogan has fallen woefully short.